All right. Excellent.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody to another edition of the Bluegrass Poker Podcast. I am your host, Blythe Dahlem, aka BGP, aka Bluegrass Poker. Today, I am joined by Matt Hunt, aka Mental Health Matt on Twitch. He is a professional poker player, been playing for a while. He's also a coach at SolveForWhy, and he's been
Yes, indeed.
also in the streaming streets. Not really playing poker once a week, regular. Usually these days, you're doing a bankroll challenge right now,
Sure.
and mainly talking about mental health as well as playing a lot of video games on stream and a lot of
Hmm.
other stuff as well. It's a lot of
Yes,
fun. We'll
indeed.
we'll get into that soon, but thank
I'm
you for
sure.
coming. Thank you for coming on, Matt. I really appreciate it a lot.
No problem, man. I'm happy to be here. It's always nice to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, your streams are a lot of fun, and I want to get to that. I want to get to that soon, but right now I kind of wanted to ask you first how you started in poker, how you got into it, and how
Sure.
your journey led you uh to becoming a coach and then living in America too. Because
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a weird journey, long journey, thousands of miles from where I grew up. But yeah, it's been a long one. So it started maybe, I want to say, I think the very first time I played poker, I played one time in like 2007 or something when I was in college, but I didn't know anything about it and I wasn't even paying really much attention. We were just like using it as an excuse to sit at a table and drink, right? So outside of that, I started playing in 2009. Some friends and I decided that I think it was like New Year's Day 2009, and we were all like hungover or something, and we decided that a fun thing to do would be to go buy some poker chips and then play poker. And we did that once, and then we found it really fun. And we just before by the time 6 months had gone by, we were doing it like 3 or 4 nights a week. And my friend was like breaking up with his girlfriend because she was so mad that he was always having everybody over to his house to play poker every night and stuff like that. Right. So clearly we all got very into it very quickly. But then what happened was my, like the friendship group that I had that we were playing poker with, there was a lot of people from a lot of different like areas of the college, right? So people studying different things and people who knew each other different ways, and some of them just kind of graduated that summer and just left, and they weren't there anymore when came back the next year, and we're looking to play more poker, right? So our weekly game kind of broke up because people moved away, and I started playing online, and again, that was the kind of thing where before long it was like, okay, this is the regular thing that I do in my evenings, and it kind of got to a point where I was looking to take it more seriously, started learning a bit more, and eventually applied to join a staking operation to get staked to play, small stakes MTTs on, I think it was Stars and Full Tilt back then. So this was like 2010, 2011. Um, and at the time I was doing a lot of volunteer work right after college, and I needed something to do when I was done with that, and I was looking at poker as a potential option. But in the end, in late 2011, I was hating this volunteer job that I was doing. I was working out in Dublin, Ireland, helping to run the operations in Ireland for a youth charity I was working with, and I basically was like, I sort of was weighing it up in my mind for a while, but in the end, I just quit, and I went back to the UK and decided to just make a go at trying to play poker for a living. And a couple of years after that had been going relatively well, I started coaching because I had a bit of a teaching background from outside of poker. I had done a little bit of teaching in a couple different areas, and I figured it would be a good opportunity to use that skill set. So I started coaching. I started working with Tournament Poker Edge. So the guys at TPE, shout out to Derek Tenbush and all the guys over at TPE. They gave me my start in coaching, so I'm very grateful for that. And yeah, but a few years after that, I ended up moving over to work with SolveForWhy. And in the meantime, I had met my wife, who's from the US. We met online, and we ended up deciding that we were going to, after a period of traveling around together, we decided we were going to settle in the US and chose Vegas. And that ended up allowing me to work a bit more closely with the SolveForWhy guys, and sort of one thing sort of led to another, and now I'm I think a fully integrated member of the team here at SolveForWhy, and we're looking forward to hopefully getting back to putting a lot more time and energy into coaching as a company after the pandemic situation ends. And that's where we are now. I live in Vegas, and like I say, I'm a long way from home, but I'm very happy here, and it's been a weird journey. But it's if you told me 10 years ago that in 2021 I was going to be living in Vegas, and I was going to have the kind of lifestyle of being able to be very heavily involved with poker like this, yeah, certainly it's a really good place to be in. So I definitely wouldn't complain.
Yeah, definitely. It's also a lot different, I can imagine, from moving to Vegas, where there's only one site to play on online, and the online
Yeah.
environment has
Mm-hmm.
changed a lot
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
since you got started. From
Yeah.
switching to an area that's like mostly live. Do you end up playing? I mean, obviously now you're probably not playing a lot live, but did you
Right.
start playing a lot live when you moved to Vegas?
I definitely started playing more. Yeah, I definitely started paying more attention to, looking out for good events that were happening. And yeah, certainly 2018 was the year that I probably played the most live poker, and I had a really good summer that summer in the World Series. And I think that it definitely was a bit of an adjustment, because I started out playing almost exclusively online. I only played, outside of just random home games and stuff, I only played a few live events here and there during the first sort of 6 or 7 years of my career. Because in the UK, there's a good amount of live poker, but it depends where you live, and sometimes traveling to play live isn't really as worthwhile as staying at home and continuing the online grind. So
Mm-hmm.
I had never really put a lot of time and energy into playing live when I was back in the UK, but moving to Vegas, seeing that there were some online games, and the online games were pretty decent, but there wasn't a ton of availability, and it wasn't as easy to just be an online grinder here. Yeah, I kind of recognized that there was going to be a bit of a change necessary, and it was nice to be able to dive into playing a little bit more live. And certainly in the early stages in 2018, I was lucky enough for that to work out pretty well, because I ended up running really good that summer and making a few final tables and stuff. So I was pretty happy with how it went. But yeah, obviously since the pandemic started, not a lot of live poker. Haven't played live since at least a year ago now, I think. But I am very much looking forward to when it's done, because I do enjoy live poker a lot, and I'm looking forward to getting back out there and mixing it up when we all get vaccinated and everything's a little bit more safe.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. See, the only live games I've really played are home games. Like
Uh-huh.
that's just I got hooked on that. Like I believe it was not last fall, but the fall before that. I got my roommate here, and
Sure, that's cool.
yeah, and then we all went back to school, and I was like, I was still playing. I started playing online, and then COVID hit, and we all got sent
Yeah.
home for like a
Mm-hmm.
week, and we were like, you know, we didn't know what was going on, and so like we
Yeah.
got back to playing like poker for a few weeks, and then we realized, oh wait, this is very serious. Or for like the week, I think, and we're
Yeah.
like, oh, this is serious, and so we went
Mm-hmm.
back in our homes, and we stayed there, and it was just like me and a few of my buddies, and then I started playing online.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So
Yeah,
your sort of online origin story is very different to mine, but yeah,
somewhat
hopefully
similar.
hopefully we'll both be able to. Well, it's similar in that sense, but it's also different in the pandemic being
Right.
the main the main sort of driving force that dictates a lot of what's gone on in the world the last 18 months or so. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that everybody has a different origin story when it
Hmm.
comes to poker, and it's always interesting to hear all the different ways that we arrive in the game, I suppose.
Right. Yeah, I know. I know. I started off playing cash like in a lot of the home games, and then I was playing cash online and built up a small roll and proceeded to bust it like a lot of people do.
We've
And
all
then
done that.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and then when quarantine started, I was like, well, cash didn't work out last time, so I'm gonna play
Hmm.
MTTs because I had no idea what I was doing. And it was strange because there was that mini little boom for like
Hmm.
online stuff,
Yeah.
even in the U.S. On like
Hmm.
America's Card Room, like the pools were just huge, and I
Yeah.
didn't realize how soft it was. But then I was like, I got hooked, and I started trying to take my game seriously, and now I'm back on cash, but
Hmm.
it's yeah, did you start out playing cash? Because I know you're mostly
Uh,
an MTT guy.
no, yeah, we started playing tournaments. So when I first started in home games, the format was, it was basically like a six-handed sit and go pretty
Mm-hmm.
much, and I I've always gravitated more towards tournaments. I think I do play more cash now just because the convenience of being able to play a cash session compared to being locked into playing a longer
Yeah.
tournament session is definitely a bonus. But I I think the format that most naturally appeals to me is tournaments, and I'm not sure exactly why that is. I think it's something to do with maybe the fact that every hand is different. You don't really play the same hand twice in tournaments,
Mm-hmm.
whereas in cash you very much do play the same hand twice in a lot of contexts, because it's, especially online, it's like it's the same configuration of stack sizes, same players, same positions. And if you could very feasibly have situations where two orbits in a row, the exact same spot comes up where you open, one particular player calls, and the same type of flop comes out. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I like the sort of variability of tournaments, because the stacks are always changing, the spots are always changing, and especially live, it's like playing it you're playing maybe 50 hands with the same group of players, and then you're moving tables a couple hours later, and all sorts of things. So it's a very dynamic environment. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what I love too. And then once I got back in school, that was the main thing. Like I wanted to play MTTs, but it just doesn't work with a student schedule,
Mm-hmm.
because
Sure.
without staying up all night and getting averaging 3 hours of sleep and then sleeping through classes,
Yeah.
which uh,
Yeah,
school is too
not a
expensive
great
to
way to
do
go.
that. No.
Yeah, it's to stay in school, kids. Don't drop out, and or don't like skip all your classes and just play poker. It's funny though, because I came through at a time where I was very, very marginally too late in discovering poker
Yeah.
to take advantage of the opportunity to play a good amount of volume during my college years. I kind of discovered it right towards the end of my college years, or I got
Mm-hmm.
more into it towards the end of it. But if I'd come into it a couple years earlier, I would have been able to play online during the peak period when online poker was just a gold mine, during like 2005 through 2008 kind of time, So
Yeah.
I'm always I'm always sad that I missed out on that period by a year or two, but it's got to be an interesting experience coming into online poker. Kind of in the past couple of years with the poker environment as it is, and you missed a lot. I gotta tell you,
I oh
the
trust
younger
me, I know.
generation missed a lot.
I've heard so much, so many great stories, and watched old WSOPs. Just like what,
Mm-hmm.
like Jamie Gold's run was like something that I
Mm-hmm.
just was like, wow, that
Yeah, actually,
worked.
that one was before my time. That one was
Yeah,
2006, so I'm in the
right.
same boat there, where I watched that one, um, retrospectively. But the first one I remember, the first WSOP final table I actually watched or followed, because in the UK it was a lot harder to actually watch them, but was the 2009 one. So it was I think that was the one that Joe Catter won.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the one where like Darvin Moon was like the star of it. He
Darvin
was like
Moon.
the guy who was just completely god moding everybody and just getting dealt aces every five hands for 9 days straight. And then almost won the World Series. And I got to tell you, if Darvin Moon had won that event, that would have been like, as great of a guy as Joe Catter seems to be, and as great of a player as he
Yeah,
is. Darvin Moon winning that event in that year would have been another moneymaker style thing. It would have been the closest we could have gotten to a moneymaker effect. So it's a real shame that Darvin Moon didn't win.
I know. That one was fun to watch. I think I remember watching Berkey's thing on Poker Go,
Mm-hmm.
the one where he analyzed the WSOP final
Yeah.
tables, which
Mm-hmm.
I think he did that one, if I'm remembering
Yeah, he
correctly.
probably did. Yeah.
That one was interesting, but yeah, the joke had it. He seemed cool, but like you just wanted to watch Darvin Moon win it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was just
Yeah.
he had the Saints hat, same hat every day. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's ready to go.
Yeah. He just shows up. He just plays his cards, and he just wins all the chips. Like that makes the game look super easy. But unfortunately, no, we haven't had another Darvin Moon since then. It's gonna be
Sadly,
tough to get another guy come along and do that.
yeah, I know ACR is doing something. I don't know if you saw that on their Twitter lately. That they're like trying to the next moneymaker or whatever they're calling it
Mm,
now. That like
okay.
they have Chris Moneymaker as like their as one of their.
Yeah. Hmm.
I don't know if you saw that at all.
I
It,
did. Yeah. I
yeah.
saw. I saw that Moneymaker moved to ACR. I think it's a great move for them. I think that anything that they can do that can kind of harness that would be great. I think the only issue is that the moneymaker thing was it was something that went way beyond just an advertising gimmick by a poker site. You know, it was like people heard about him, people who wouldn't usually take any interest in poker. They heard about this guy who spent $40 to play an online satellite and then ended up winning $1 million.
Yeah.
That story was what captivated people, whether you liked poker or not. And the problem is the idea of being the next moneymaker is appealing, but it's only appealing if you knew about the previous moneymaker.
Right.
So it's only appealing to people who are already in poker. So what we really need is something to organically happen. We need to be able to get lucky enough that somebody with a really compelling story happens to win a really, really big tournament, and we can publicize that outside of poker. And that just, you can't like capture that lightning in a bottle and just make it happen. So we're just kind of waiting for something really good to happen in that area, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's, I guess it's talked about amongst some poker players. One of the things that's like less talked about with moneymakers thing is just how ESPN and like how they crafted that story together on the whole thing with Lon and Norm doing the commentary, talking about it, just like going back interviewing his family or whatever.
Yeah.
That's part of just, if it wasn't for that, if he just won it and people posted about it in like a newspaper, it wouldn't have happened. But it was on ESPN.
Yeah, exactly. The storytelling that ESPN does for the main event final table is really important. It's just it's a shame, particularly for 2020, that the main event was just a non-event, kind of like nobody really knew what was, like, I don't know who, I think I know who won the two main events, I think, but I'm not really sure. I couldn't tell you I know the first one was like an Eastern European guy, and then the second one was a guy who, it was a South American guy who final tabled it one time before, I think, maybe. I don't really know exactly, but I kind of have the vague idea there. But like the viewing numbers for ESPN, the main event, were way down, and I think that we've got a lot to do as an industry to make poker, to get poker on a positive trajectory again. But like so many of the biggest things that impact it are things that we have no control over. Like it's a lot of the time it's all about like the state of the economy and how much disposable income people have, and we don't control that. Like we don't have any input over that. And that's a force that is way beyond our influence. So in a lot of ways, I think the poker world has to be quite adaptable in how it tries to promote the game and how it tries to attract new players. But the attraction of new players will always be the priority. Like if you can get people interested in poker who weren't previously interested in poker, like that's, at least the way I see it, that's pretty much all that really matters. Like if you can consistently just do that and create reasons for people to care, the game's going to be fine.
Yeah. I was listening to it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was listening to are you familiar with the Finding Equilibrium, the YouTube channel for the guy who does GTO
really good videos?
Yeah, I was listening to one of his from, I think it was around the start of the pandemic, where he was talking about like what needs to change in poker, and he started to compare poker to golf, saying like we need to do something like that, where it's like we don't want to promote like the gambling aspect of it and stuff. We need to like it needs to be something like golf, where it's like, sure, you can go out there and you can play really bad, and tons of people do it, and they spend a lot of money on it as a hobby, and they watch Tiger Woods and they're like astounded that they can pull off that kind of maneuvers. But they still want to keep going to play, even if they're still going to be like 18 handicap for the rest of their lives, because they just love it. Like that's what he was saying. It was really something that interests me, because I was just like, how can we compare? Like how would that even work? Just because I played golf, I used to do it back in high school, and I was like, I just like, I understand where he's coming from, but I just don't know like if we can really like do that easily.
I think that I see where he's coming from as well, but I think I partially disagree. I think that the way I look at it is there's two things that contribute to somebody being that. Well, there's two things that prop up the poker economy as a whole. It's people who play poker and think they're winning, but they're actually losing. So they're dumping money into the economy, but they don't realize it. And then there's people who know they're losing and who choose to play anyway. And what it seems like Finding Equilibrium is talking about is the second category, where, like golf, it's a hobby that you spend money on, and you're willing to spend money on it because you enjoy it a lot. And now that's fine. Like, we want poker to be enjoyable. Of course, we want that category of player to exist. But the tricky part is that there's a significant limit on how much money that person is going to spend. Because if you first of all, if you talked about it in the same terms as golf, like if you um if you asked a certain person who's really into golf, how much money do you actually spend per year on golf? If they're not like playing golf competitively, it's not going to be like they spend like 40% of their income on golf. It's just not, that's not going to happen, right? So there's going to be a ceiling on how much that person who knows they're losing is going to be willing to drop before they either quit or they start to get better. Now, when they get better, the amount of money they're dumping into the poker economy is reduced. And that means we need to replace that money with somebody else. So we need to be able to grow. We need to be able to continue growing and bringing someone else to replace the money that that player is now taking back out of the economy because they're not winning as much. So that category of player is a little problematic because it's not super sustainable to think that players are going to be endlessly just firing money at poker and just losing and not caring. And then the second category is problematic because there's a bit of a deceptive element in, maintaining a lot of players who don't know how much they're losing, but they're actually losing a lot, or, players who think they're winning, but they're actually losing. And there's a lot of, a lot of aspects of that. It kind of taps into what you mentioned in the gambling aspect of it, right? Where the more we highlight the gambling aspect of it, the more we make it seem like a certain tournament is a really good, profitable opportunity to for somebody to make money, let's say, and they believe that it's a good investment for them. The more we kind of emphasize that gambling part of the game, and it makes it harder for players to see it as a skill-based exercise, right? So the two parts of the poker economy that are actually contributing money to allowing the economy to sustain itself, because they're paying rake, they're losing money into the economy, which gives winning players some incentive to play, etc. They're kind of at odds with each other. And the way I look at it is we always need people to enjoy poker. We always need there to be an appeal to playing. We need playing to be fun because no one's going to bother doing it if it's not. And then the other part of that we still have to resolve is what do we want as a community, what do we want our relationship with gambling to be? To what extent do we want to say openly to people, come here for the fun despite the fact you're losing money? Or do we want to say, oh, come here because you might win money, and then we're kind of tricking them to thinking that they're actually going to win money when they're not, right? And that deceptive element, it's just a very extreme version of what any company deals with, which is like, to what extent is it acceptable to hype up your company's product to the point where you tell people it's like the solution to all their problems, right? Like, because it's not, of course, no matter what product you're making, it's not the solution to everybody's problems.
Right.
But the whole advertising industry is basically based on presenting things as if they are, right? It's like, buy this product. We've all seen, like, buy this product and it'll make you more attractive. It'll make your wife less unhappy with you. It'll make your kids happy. It'll fix everything, and so the poker version of that is, how do we promote the game to people and we make them feel like this is a fun thing that they can do where they can also win money without us, basically lying to them and saying to them like, oh yeah, this is this tournament is a great chance for you to win $1 million, when in reality, if you look at the main event, let's say, main event, 7,000 players, 8,000 players in the field, whatever, probably, I don't know, 3,000 to 4,000 of those 7,000 players are drawing stone dead to win the main event, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reality of the situation, that, you know, millions of dollars are being dropped into that event by players who just will not win it no matter how good they run. So it's a very big question. And I think it's going to take a long time for us to figure out how we want to answer that as an industry, for sure.
Right. Yeah, I know because there's different types of players. There's
Mm-hmm.
people get into the game for different reasons, and then people stay in the game for different reasons. Like
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know friends who just still like the gambling aspect of it, and they're just
Mm-hmm.
in it for
Of
that, and they're
course.
still like, they just like they like going in playing like on an app with me or something, and then like
Sure.
but they
Mm-hmm.
spend like a lot of money on sports betting and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have like me, who I'm the only one in my friend group who I think actually like tries to study
Yeah.
in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting to try to like different sites want to advertise to different players, but and they also want to advertise to regs because there seem to be more regs than recs or
Mm-hmm.
something in the pools, and it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing about it really is, at least the way I see it, like, I don't think any poker site should put a substantial amount of energy into catering to professionals,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like the professionals are going to go wherever the environment, it has enough soft players and also is comfortable for them, to the point where if it's like excuse me, if it's an online site, the software is pretty decent, or if it's a casino, the chairs are comfortable, the structures are good, things like that, right? They're going to go Professionals are going to go where the soft money is. And you're not really going to be able to there's a ceiling on how good your advertising to pros is going to be, because there's a finite number of professional poker players at any one time. You're not going to attract somebody to become a professional poker player just to play one tournament, right? So it's really the way I look at it is, sites should obviously try to make everybody as comfortable as possible, but when it comes to what should be their priority, like I say, it really comes down to attracting new players. If you can attract
Mm-hmm.
somebody to play poker who wouldn't otherwise, if you can convince somebody to spend, I don't know, $200 playing a poker tournament instead of betting on his favorite sports team or something like that, if you can do that, that's what's sustainable. Convincing people that poker is more fun, or just generally better or more rewarding than other things. And that's why it needs to be fun. It needs to be a social experience. It needs to be something that can be enjoyable, as opposed to, like, I mean, how much money is spent by people who bet sports, and then all they do is they just sit there and sweat the game and watch their team or whatever, sweat their bet. Um, and then their team wins or loses and they just go home, right? Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
not really a social experience. Sometimes it might be, because you could watch a game with friends or whatever,
Right.
but the gambling part of it is not the social experience. The watching the game with friends is a social experience. With poker, the social part of it and the gambling are interwoven in a
Oh,
way that they're not with other areas.
yeah.
And I I think that the I think we're kind of getting through the period where poker was just, for a while, I think live poker was not fun for a lot of people. I think that there was a period where, if you went to play live at a lot of places in Vegas, in the States, maybe, I think this was probably like 2016 through 2018, maybe, there was a period where you would see a lot of guys wearing headphones and shades, and you'd see a lot of people just excuse me, not talking. You'd see very little interaction, and you'd see like a lot of dissatisfaction among recreational players. Like, I spoke to a lot of recreational players who basically just kind of gave up playing a lot of live poker around that time, or just decreased the amount that they play, because it wasn't particularly fun for them. And they could tell that everybody around them was taking it more seriously than they were. And from that, they could extrapolate they were probably losing. So they stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's changing. Just the impression I get is that that's changing, particularly, I think, post pandemic, it will change, because I think everybody will be a bit more, eager to be interacting, as opposed to just kind of sitting in your own little bubble, because we've all been in a bubble for about a year.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the game is still going to be dealing with that for a while. I think if we make the game fun and we bring new people into it because it's fun, everything will be fine. We just have to figure out ways to do that. And that's, thankfully, it's not my job.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that's the job of people who know a lot more about these things than me.
Yeah. Well, one of your jobs though is as a poker coach.
Yes,
Of
that's
this,
true.
and I kind of wanted to just ask a few questions about that. I guess when you got
Sure.
started with Solve for Why,
Hmm.
like what were you really looking for with that? Were you looking to make content related to poker and just do that, or try to like improve, help people improve with the game? Like, did you have like a specific goal set, like goal in mind?
I think if anything, what excited me about working with SolveForWhy was the chance to work with people who had a different skill set from myself. You know, people like Berkey, Christian Soto, at the time Jordan Young as well. People who had more of a live poker background in a lot of ways, and who had a skill set that I felt that I could learn from, but also in an area where I felt like I could contribute as well. Because with a company like we are that does classroom based seminars, you know, this was very different than any kind of coaching that I had done in the past. It was very different than, you know, one-to-one coaching. And so what it kind of gave me was an opportunity to use my teaching skill set, use the skills that I had built in ways that were a little bit more dynamic than just, you know, talking with someone behind a screen, talking with someone um, you know, on a one-to-one basis. And ultimately the first, you know, the first involvement I had with being part of the SolveForWhy Academy, and you know, the first opportunities I had to kind of engage with the students on a closer basis, it was really really fun. And I enjoy being in a classroom. I enjoy teaching in that kind of environment because, like I said, I've done it before. And it felt like a really good opportunity to be involved in something that was a little different, and to use my skill set effectively, and to kind of grow what I'd already been doing as a coach, you know, to grow my to make better content, but primarily to engage with students in different ways. And
Mm-hmm.
it seemed like just an exciting kind of an opportunity to do something a bit new, and that was kind of how I approached it.
Yeah, and you haven't been able to do those classroom setting academies lately, which
Not lately,
no.
but we're hopeful. We're hopeful. Yeah, the obviously the company's been a bit in limbo since the start of the pandemic, but
Mm-hmm.
I think I think everybody's starting to get much more optimistic about where things are headed by the end of this year.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm crossing my fingers for some positive news in the live events department, both from the company perspective and from the poker perspective as a whole as well.
Yeah, I know, and y'all dropped the price a while ago. I believe it is. I believe it is going
Mhm.
back up. Last I saw, but that
Think so. Mhm.
$10 a month training was like the college student's dream
Yeah, I can
for
imagine. I
poker
can
coaching.
imagine. Right there, we go. We should have done some kind of, you know, promotional thing for college students as well. I
Yeah,
don't know what we could have done, but like it seems like it would have been a ripe demographic for us to just, you know, go
yeah.
all in on them.
I'm, yeah, it would have it could have been something, I don't know, but I mean, all I know is I got tons of great content over the last few
Cool.
months. Yeah,
I'm glad.
it's great. If you're not checking out Solve for Why, you should. A lot of your videos too were like, for some like the MTT things were just mind blowing in some of a sense. You just like kind of like realize like, oh, that's what I should be doing with my range on different rivers, or like how I should be attacking things pre-flop, and then understanding ICM and all that stuff. Like it's just
Sure.
it's a, doing all that's a lot. It's like just trying to learn all of that. Like when you're is
Hmm.
nowadays I feel like, as I've been learning stuff, with everything being more theoretical than
Hmm.
it once was, I feel like my like the learning curve for people in poker has just been so much more different. Instead of just like, I felt like he had ace king, so I folded. It's
Yeah.
just kind of like you need to learn like how EV works and all that stuff, and it's
Hmm.
just been like so much more for me to just think about like as all that has changed. So when you're coaching like that, have you noticed that when you're coaching students who are maybe less experienced, it's a lot
Hmm.
different than how you initially learned how to play poker, or were you just kind of like figure it out on your own?
I think that, I mean, when I first started out, I had a coach in the sense that when I signed on with some of those sort of micro stakes backing groups that I played with in the past, I would get coaching from the guys that were leading the groups. So
Mm-hmm.
I had a certain amount of coaching, but the extent to which poker coaching was developed as a form back in 2010 or whatever, when I first started getting coaching, it's light years from what it is now, because we didn't have we didn't have anything more than Poker Stove. Like, you remember, what Poker Stove
I
is?
do know what Poker Stove
Okay,
is.
you don't know Poker Stove. Okay,
Yeah.
good. I was thinking you might be too young to have even heard of that, but
No,
but Poker Stove is a discontinued piece of software now. But it was the first sort of basic equity calculator that you could have, and there were no solvers. There were no, there was Hold'em Manager. There was Hold'em Manager 1, and I think everybody who played online got a lot of value out of that at the time, because obviously all the sites allowed HUDs, all the sites, allowed you to data mine. And well, I mean, they didn't allow it, but like, you could easily do it. They wouldn't punish you if you did it. And every site had problems with, like, it would be such and such a player has been multi-accounting, or like, there's just all of these, scandals and cheating scandals and stuff going on all the time back then. Because it was the Wild West in the sense of very limited regulation or very limited rules you had to abide by. And on top of that, it was the Wild West strategy wise, because a lot of what it came down to was whoever was just the most aggressive player in any given situation was probably going to end up winning. And over time, all that really happened was we spent the period, maybe all the way from 2005, when poker strategy first started to kind of evolve a bit more, through to like 2015, when solvers came around, when PO was invented, is we spent that whole period figuring out how aggressive is it acceptable to be, basically, right? And in the end, we discovered, like, you can be really aggressive and you can easily get away with it. And now, we're kind of still in that era, but it took a long time, I think, for us to understand any sort of, like, it took a long time for game theory to even become a part of the landscape in poker, even though game theory itself has existed for a long time. And I think a large part of that was just because poker wasn't, for the longest time, it wasn't the kind of area where, talented mathematicians or experienced, software engineers were putting a lot of time and energy into discovering things about it, right? The people who were putting in their energy were a lot of people who, a lot of guys at that time were just fresh out of college, so a lot of the people who were putting in the most time and energy to learn how to get good at poker were guys who didn't have experience from other jobs, because they'd spent their entire adult lives playing poker up to that point, right? So they didn't have a skill set they could bring to bear to develop high level software to explore poker, or to develop coaching methodologies that could really produce high level players at a high rate. We just had people who everybody thought were pretty good at poker, talking about poker in ways that made sense to them. And for years, that was the bulk of poker training content. It was people who were good at poker talking about poker. And I think that we've only really scratched the surface to this point in terms of the type of training tools, the type of software, the type of methodologies that will be available to us down the line. Because when you look at the type of thing that, the type of training and the type of tools that are used by, let's say, chess players or people in any number of other different disciplines, it's so complex. And those are disciplines that are way, way older than poker. So when we get to the point where poker coaching has been around for, more than the 15 years or so that it has been, maybe even less, we'll start to see some evolution there. But it's such a new field. And I think part of what excites me about it really is that we don't necessarily know how far it could go. We don't know at what point we're going to say, okay, we've done all the software that we can do. We've made all the software we can make, because we certainly aren't at that point yet. And a lot of the people who are very sort of doom and gloom about the impact that solvers are going to have on the poker community, I think it's a bit short-sighted, because if you think that solvers have killed the game of poker, then, like, wait until even more complex tools come out. Wait until tools come out that can tell you things about the game that we can't possibly say yet, because that will happen.
Yeah.
It's inevitable with the developments in technology that exist just across society. Like, we're going to have, probably within maybe 15 years from now, we're probably going to have commercially available quantum computing devices that are going to be accessible. Like, people are going to have the ability to have a quantum computer in your home. And when that happens, there will then be poker software that can run on a quantum computer. And who the hell knows what that's going to be able to do?
Right.
Because we're talking about quantum computing being like, the theory is that it's going to speed up what we currently have by like 10,000 times or something. It's going to be able to do stuff that currently takes thousands of years in half an hour, and it's like, we can't even comprehend that. So how could we possibly know how it's going to affect poker? So it's going to be a weird couple decades for poker players, but I'm not intending on going anywhere. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it all pans out.
Yeah, I know. That part of what you said there too was interesting to me. What was that? Part of what got me into poker was game theory, because I'm an econ student, and
cool.
I learned a little bit about it, and then I was like, wait, and so I was going to do research over it this summer, and I got like this book. It's game theory.
Okay.
It's and like, just because I'm an econ nerd as well, and I read through that, and it was interesting too, because the book's older than a lot of poker institutions, besides like a lot of casinos that exist. And they talk a lot about poker in terms of game theory. And it's interesting that you mentioned that game theorists really never spent much time on poker, but they did talk about it a bit in there.
Yeah, it seems like they did. And maybe it's all it is just that poker players never read that book. So they didn't know that someone had already done the work for them.
Well, there wasn't much in there, but it was just like they used poker as like a way of explaining different ways of like different types of games, like how GameTree works, and it's like basic math. So like, I'm sure that they used a lot of that, like the people who made PioSolver used a lot of that stuff. But yeah, it was, sadly, all my research plans with that fell through, and I wouldn't say I read the book for nothing, because I learned a lot from it, just in general, because game theory can be applied to a lot of things. But that kind of sucks. But
interesting topic.
Yeah, I know. It's cool, and that's part of what got me into like studying it, because I was like, hey, you can. It's rooted in economics. People make money in economics.
Right.
People make money in poker. But one thing that I'm also curious about, like, with game theory, people like me play lower stakes and stuff. Do you think that they should even try using solvers? Because I've heard people just be like, solvers, they're not going to tell you anything, and then other people are like, yeah, you can use solvers. You just got to know how to use them.
Yeah, I'm in the second camp. I think that anybody who plays low stakes should look at the game in terms of there are different types of skill sets in poker. There are evergreen skill sets which are never going to stop being useful, because they relate to the fundamental parts of the game that don't change, and that sometimes don't even change across game formats. So for example, like pot odds, that doesn't change when you're playing PLO. You still need to know pot odds when you play PLO. You still need to know pot odds when you play any form of poker. And you still need to know the basics of game theory just on a broad level and things like that. That skill set, if you learn that once, it doesn't change. You never have to learn it again. And then the other skill set is how to actually play, and how to play against players in a certain environment or in a certain game. And that's a very different thing, because skill sets vary between games. And a skill set that you build, well, a good example might be a skill set that a player built in the 90s as a live pro is not necessarily going to be that successful 20 years later in the 2010s, right? So that's why we've seen players basically fall to the point where they can't win in live games anymore, even in World Series events with big fields, because their skill set just isn't relevant anymore. Right. So but the problem is that when people start out in poker, what they want is to learn how to beat the players they're currently playing against. And so they take a short-term approach where they're like, okay, I'm just going to learn how to beat these players. And as a result, what happens is most people just learn how to play a tight, value-heavy range and a simple style. And sometimes it just works well, right? But what then happens is you have to unlearn stuff, because you reach a point where now you actually have to go back and learn the evergreen skill set of theory
Mm-hmm.
that you didn't learn in the first place. And that theory is going to serve you well the entirety of your poker career, and even in life outside poker, like you said, with game theory being a very widely applicable topic. So if you, it's not really about so much using solvers, because using solvers is something that you can only really get a lot out of once you have a decent understanding of game theory and of the fundamental evergreen skills that relate to all forms of poker.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use a solver or not, but what matters is, do you have that basic skill set of knowing what game you're actually playing and how that game works on a really deep level? Because if you don't, something will happen at some point that's going to force you to go back and look at it. And I've seen so many players at this point attempt to get by through their entire poker career, mostly recreational players. I've seen so many players attempt to get by without really doing a substantial amount of theory work, because they think it's never going to be necessary. But the reality is, however much time you put it off,
Mm-hmm.
you're eventually going to have to do it, because you're eventually going to reach a point. It's inevitable that you'll reach a point where a purely practical approach of, I just want to learn how to beat these players, is not going to hold up, because that environment is going to change too much. So players who play low stakes should look at it as, I may not use a solver right now, but I'm going to eventually. And then once I have that game theory skill set, once I have an understanding of the fundamentals, I'm going to start to figure out how to use a solver in a way that is productive for what I'm seeking to achieve. I don't think at this point that it's actually possible to really get substantially good at poker without using solvers. I think we've reached
Yeah.
that point. I think we've hit the point where if you say, I'm never going to use a solver, and you just have that single-minded, I refuse kind of an approach, you're basically drawing dead. Because even if you get really, really good at like having people around you who are good at using solvers and who can sort of tell you what the solver would say, you're still not getting that benefit for yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
I do think there's a ceiling on how far you can go without it. But at low stakes, can you succeed without it? Sure, you can succeed without an understanding of what the solver would do in a certain spot, but you can't really succeed without an understanding of pot odds,
Yeah.
or basic fundamental stuff.
Yeah, and I think like that's something that you can easily get lost in if you like start out with some or a lot of training content that's geared towards solvers these days is
Yeah.
like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, hey, this is what the solver says, and then it's like, okay, that's what it
Right.
says. But if you're not really like, if you don't have an understanding of how pot odds work or how ranges work and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you're not gonna be able to do that.
Sure.
Yeah, and one thing I was thinking of while you were saying that was, you know, you said people want to beat the games that or people just start wanting to beat the games that they're playing in, which I think
Yeah.
is like
Mm-hmm.
that's what people want to do. But and I saw
Yeah.
somebody say like your goal is you want to win in the game you're playing in for sure, but your
Mm-hmm.
goal in the long term is to be able to beat all the games.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Exactly.
that's just something that you really have to keep working on because you don't want to grind 1-2 forever.
Right.
No one really gets into poker thinking I'm going to be a professional 1-2 player, you know.
Yeah. Exactly. And the whole essence of the talk there about evergreen skill sets is, if you if you learn just to beat the game I'm playing in, and then move up and beat that game, and then move up and beat that game, eventually, regardless, you're going to hit a point where, in order to beat a certain game, you need, like, there's no way to develop a simple skill set that can beat that game. Like if you get to like 5-10 live, like 5-10 live in a lot of places is tough enough that if you just purely try to look at it through the lens of, I'm just going to try to beat these players, I'm just going to try to look at it exploitatively, and you don't have even a fundamental understanding of equilibrium and things like that, then you're just not going to win.
Yeah.
Like you're just not going to win. But the paradox is, once you get that skill set of the fundamentals, developing a strategy that can win is a pretty quick process from that point, because all you have to do is identify the weaknesses, take the natural option that exploits those weaknesses, and now you know how to win. It's just that as the gap between the weaknesses of the player pool and the optimal way to play gets narrower and narrower, so as the skill level of the players you're up against gets better and better, it becomes more and more important to know exactly where the gaps between equilibrium and real play actually exist. And the problem is that when the gap gets narrow, it's harder and harder to identify, right? So what ends up happening is you make more mistakes when you get up against better players, because you think they're making a mistake because they're folding too much, but they're actually not, and now it costs you money, right? Whereas against worse players, you might think that they're folding too much, but there's a safety net because they're actually folding even more than you think they are, right? So you can be a little bit wrong about, where you're, how many bluffs you're supposed to have or whatever, but you still end up benefiting and winning. But once the margins get narrower, an even more detailed understanding of the theory becomes more and more important. So I don't think we're heading to a point where humans ever, start playing, very, very close to equilibrium, because I don't think even the best humans these days play that close to equilibrium. But I do think that we're heading towards a point where eventually a good solid understanding of what equilibria look like in a variety of spots is going to be a very fundamental skill that you just cannot skip out. And the players that try to skip it out are going to have to come back to it at some point down the line.
Yeah. One thing that's kind of interesting about that, I think a lot of training content I've seen now blends together, but like who did it. But I've seen some people do like training content where they'll like, show the solver output, and then they'll be like, and then if we like pull up the calculator here and do some really simple math, you can see, you're doing this because you're getting a price, or you're folding this much because that's like kind of what minimum defense frequency dictates, and that's what the solver's doing. It's like, see, this is why the math's important, which is also very important. And then, thinking ahead, like when time's gonna change, maybe eventually we'll get like in Cyberpunk 2077 land where people start having like the brain implants that just like pull up Pio like immediately and they just see their range.
I hope not. I hope we don't get to the point where we have to like ban any kind of biological modifications at the table. I mean, maybe we will, who knows, but I might be old enough that I probably won't make it that far. So I may not have to worry about it, but we'll see. I just hope that when we get to that point in real life doesn't have as many glitches as Cyberpunk did when it came out. So as long as that happens, I'm not going to be complaining, because I gotta tell you, I played that game a bunch and then I just stopped because I was like, this is too frustrating. I think in my first like 20 hours of gameplay, I had like 7 or 8 just pure system crashes. The game just crashes. It just exits for you, doesn't save, go back, redo the last half hour of gameplay. Like it happened like 7 times. So as long as real life doesn't do that, I'm happy.
That's good. Yeah. That's a good segue to Twitch stuff too. Back on Cyberpunk though, did you play on PlayStation or you play on PlayStation?
I played on PS5. Right? Even on PS5.
Wow.
It still crashes. It looks better on PS5. It looks really good.
Yeah.
But it still has glitches, like weird stuff happening. A lot of the enemy AI is really broken, and the game still crashes. So like I basically said I'm not going to play that game anymore until they release a full PS5 upgrade, like not just a patch, but like an upgraded not a remaster, but like a, you know what I mean? Like how they're going to do that with a bunch of games. Like, and I'm just leaving it alone until they do that, because there is so much stuff to fix. They literally should have waited another year before they released that game. It's nuts that they released it when they did.
See, I had a great time playing it. I played it on PC.
Me too.
I played it on PC, and I never had the game like crash once. I had like a few. Wow. Yeah, I this is a brand new PC that I'm using right now. My friend and I built it over the winter. I just kind of paid for it. He's an engineer, so he really helped me put everything together.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And cool. Yeah, so everything worked just fine. I got a graphics card at the right time before everybody that wants to mine Bitcoin started to clear them off the shelves. Yeah. But so you've played so on stream, on streaming, you've been playing some video games on stream. I've seen you play like Last of Us, Spider-Man, like a lot of PlayStation's games. Which I've never had a PlayStation, so I've never been able to play those games. I was an Xbox guy growing up. Like Halo is my favorite game, so I couldn't live without it.
I'm one of the rare gamers who has no loyalties. Like
Okay.
the order of consoles that I've had in my life went Sega Master System, Nintendo 64, PlayStation 2, uh, Xbox 360, PS4. No, sorry, Xbox 360, Xbox One, PS4, PS5. And I've obviously played PC stuff in and amongst that as well. Like there was
Mm-hmm.
a big period between the PS2, the end of the PS2 era in like 2006, 2007, and when I got an Xbox One, an Xbox 360, which was like late, which was like 2012, I think it was, like where I basically just mostly played PC games during that time. So I've gone completely all over the place from one console to another. Oh, and I have a Switch as well. So that's like I've had so many consoles and I've jumped around from one company to another that every time I see somebody saying like Xbox is better, PlayStation's better, like I just get like I don't care. They're all good. Just play what you want to play and don't like don't get in a war about it. Like what's the point, you know?
Yeah, so you're the Renaissance man of consoles per se.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe I am. I just kind of jump around doing whatever the hell I want and playing whatever feels like the most fun game to play at any point, I guess.
So, what made you want to start streaming gaming specifically on Twitch? So, and along with like mental health chats, you do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But what made you want to do stick to that side instead of streaming poker?
Well, the thing about streaming poker is, and I'm less soft on, I'm softer on this now, but streaming poker, I find that streaming it takes a lot of mental energy, and so it is difficult to, play my best when when I'm streaming. Like, so if I always knew if I was going to stream, it was going to have to be playing games that were maybe a little bit lower stakes than usual or something like that. And I did get used to it a little bit after I did it a couple times, and I was willing to stream the main event late last year,
Mm-hmm.
and that went okay because I was just playing one table, right? But um, I've never really been super excited about the idea of streaming poker for that reason. And then when it came to midway through last year, by the time the pandemic had been going on for a few months, with less on my plate to do as a result of SolveForWhy not having a lot of activities going on, I was still doing a lot of work with Poker Detox, but I was taking a lot of the quarantine time to just get back into gaming a lot because since moving to Vegas and since just sort of trying to get settled and making sure that my poker career was, taken care of, and I had enough opportunities that, that I wasn't like missing out on stuff. But um, I I hadn't really like played a ton of games.
Mm-hmm.
I'd played bits and pieces of stuff, but quarantine or lockdown or whatever you want to call it was an opportunity for me to really dive back into gaming. And I it really reminded me how much of a bigger part of my life it used to be and how much fun I used to have playing games. And I think that it made me want to to kind of do something that could incorporate that into my life a bit more. And then at the same time, I recognized that the people around me, I could see that with the pandemic, everybody was going through a bit of a rough time. And I also wanted to do something that could could be a foundation for me to start doing something that would be more impactful for other people as opposed to just poker or just poker coaching, which even if you're coaching, it's like you can teach somebody to play better poker and they'll make more money from it, but it doesn't feel like it's not an especially socially rewarding thing to do. It's not exactly charity work. So it's I sort of reached this point where the intersection of a bunch of different things kind of arrived in a way where I said, maybe I should just stream some games sometime, and then I did it a couple times, just playing like old N64 games, and I barely had anybody watching me, just like a couple people each time or whatever, but it was fun to the point where I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I really like this, this is kind of cool. And at that point, it kind of gave me the impetus to start thinking about how I could make it a more structured thing as opposed to just like show up, turn on a game and hoping some people show up,
Yeah.
um, and that kind of gave me the idea to start using it as a platform for mental health awareness, mental health discussions, things like that, because I think it's obviously a really important issue. It's one that's really important for me personally. It's affected a lot of people in my family, and it's something that it it's kind of nice in that it pushes me personally in a good direction. You know,
Yeah.
it keeps me kind of it keeps me connected with people. It stops me from just sort of being very inwardly focused and focused on my work and playing poker and things like that. You know, so it was a nice combination of a lot of different things and a way to start trying to kind of build up a community in that regard. And I've really enjoyed it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the time that I've spent on it, I was lucky enough during the later part of 2020 to have a little bit less of a busy schedule than I do now. So I was really grateful to be able to spend a ton of time on it then. And yeah, right now, like the place I'm in is like I'm back to a kind of similar routine of doing a lot of coaching and some playing and here and there and just trying to like focus on poker. But I really wish I had more time for streaming now. So I'm in the inverse position where previously it was like, I'm just gonna put poker up to one side for a bit and just like focus on the streaming thing. Now it's like, man, I got bills to pay. Like I can't afford to just be streaming to I can't afford to be streaming to 7 people or whatever for 6 hours a day now, you know. So
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting change, but it's been fun. I've met some really great people, had a lot of great opportunities to interview people, and I'm looking forward to what's going to be in the future for the channel, because I'm excited about where it could go, and I'm just waiting for some I guess I'm waiting for a time period to open up where I can afford to say, okay, well, my coaching schedule is a little less busy, or my playing schedule is a little less busy. Um, Maybe now's the time to just put more time and energy into streaming, you know. But as of now, it's a 2 or 3 times a week kind of a thing where I try to keep up with it as much as I can, and
Yeah.
we'll we'll see where it leads, I suppose.
Yeah. I guess that's I kind of want to be in that situation too. I guess where my schedule changes a bit and I don't have to do as much schoolwork as I've been doing or whatever, or
Sure.
just whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. Like, and
Yeah.
that's just what this like breaks are for me. Except for
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
now, it's like, oh, you got to go do internships, and I'm like, what? I'm having summers off for years. I just want to
Yeah.
keep doing that, but that's the
Mm-hmm.
harsh reality of things. You can't, as my econ professor showed us, like the first day of our 101 class is
Yeah.
resource scarcity, and they played "You Can't Always Get What You Want" by the Rolling
Uh,
Stones.
that's funny. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's exactly that. It's for me, it's all a question of time. Like
yeah,
if I had infinite time, I would be spending a lot more time on streaming. But the demands of it are such that I like if I'm going to do interviews and things, that obviously takes prep work. It
yeah,
takes scheduling. It takes effort in a way where it's very hard to it's hard to just be doing your regular thing and then be scheduling all of that on the side and then still be showing up and not being like tired and still having energy and all this stuff, you know. So I want to make sure that I never do anybody a disservice during an interview by not being fully prepared or anything like that. So it's it's been nice to kind of get some maybe to get some stream time that hasn't been purely interview focused. And
mm-hmm.
in recent weeks I've had a couple of great streams that weren't so much based around interviews, which has been really cool. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully later in the year getting back to a more consistent pattern where, you know, every week at X time, it's, you know, this is going to be an interview, you know. So it's I'm hoping to get back to that eventually.
Yeah. No, I know that's kind of what I'm doing now. It's just I'm setting up my Saturdays to do this stuff, and I don't know. I guess it's good for my mental health because I just love.
Sure.
It's one thing, I just love talking to people and I love hearing their stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I do understand like the prep work of doing it all is like
Yeah.
it is something else. Like I guess I've been following you on Twitter for a bit, so and watching your stream, so I kind of like had some of that, and I just like knew
Sure.
what I had to do. But
Yeah.
getting ready for all of that. It. Oh, what was I just thinking about? Come on. Should have written everything down.
Something to do with streaming. Yeah,
Something to do with streaming, probably.
This is the next lesson. The lesson here is you got to write stuff down. That's
I usually do.
That's an important lesson to learn in college as well. If you're in college and you don't learn to write stuff down, you're gonna have a bad time.
You have to write stuff down. I'm great at it this week, but this week was Whew.
Mm.
Speak. This week was our spring break,
Oh yeah.
which was 2 days, and I just it was so nice, and we got to go just sit outside and enjoy. I got to enjoy being with my friends, and it was like our mental health days as they call it, but
Yeah.
they haven't really cared about that much
Yeah.
because some professors were like, screw you, you still got work to do this week. Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
exactly. That used to, it's funny because that used to be the inverse of that for me. Like we used to have a thing where when I was in college, we had a week during the middle of the semester which was known as the idea was it was reading week is what they called it, right? Where the they basically they set you a bunch of extra reading, but they don't give you assignments, and you don't actually have classes that week either. So what used to happen just invariably is people would literally just go home for that week, like, and it would be like it'd be like a week's vacation, because eventually like you had some professors were like, okay, you've got reading week, I'm going to set you all this reading and stuff, and whether you did it or not would be like sort of superfluous. But with some of them it was like, I know you're all just going to go home next week and you're not actually going to like be locked up in your room reading all week. So I'm not even going to bother setting you anything extra. So you guys can just basically have a week off. And of course, the people who didn't just go home for that week would just like stay there and do nothing and just go out and get drunk and all this stuff.
yeah,
And at the end of it, you're like, why did we just have this week? Like, what is the point of this week in the schedule that is supposed to be called reading week? And the only theory I can come up with is that actually all of the professors just want a week off. And so
yeah,
they just, that's just like the purpose of it, but they can't say this is the professor's week off. So they call it a different name and they give you the impression that it's for some specific purpose, but it actually never was. So that was the way it worked for me, and I guess it seems like it's the inverse for you.
yeah. Well, I'm assuming you went to school in the UK, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So are your schedules different there? Because we always have like spring break, like that's just like a week that we've all had off. Like I've had it off for a while. I think some schools might not. I'm not sure, but I've always had like 1 week in March or
we
April
we
off.
we don't have spring break, so to speak. We have, the way it worked for me was 2 semesters of 13 weeks, and the seventh week of each one was reading week. So
Okay.
it would be a semester that starts in like late September and ends in January, and then a semester that starts in late January and ends in early June. And that would basically be it. So it would be structured in a way where you'd have exams at the end of each semester, and depending on what units or modules you took, what degree you're actually doing, sometimes you wouldn't have very many exams, so you'd get like de facto time off because you happen to not have exams. But then some people would have periods where they just get bombarded with like 8 exams in the space of 2 weeks, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it was variable, but generally it was two 13-week semesters was the structure, with a week in the middle. And the week was supposed to be, it was supposed to be like you're studying this week, or that's what
Yeah.
they told us. But in reality it was a vacation week. So
Okay.
they kind of dress it up under a different name, I guess. It's spring break with a different name,
Yeah. Um,
pretty much.
I'm glad you mentioned reading week though, because that reminded me exactly what I was going to ask you. Well, you read
Okay,
on
good.
you've been reading books on stream, and I've
Yes,
tuned in for
yeah.
some of those.
Mm-hmm.
What
Cool.
made you like decide to want to read a book on stream? Because I feel like that's something that just I would never think of like doing that. I've never seen us like anybody else really like just sit down and read a book on stream.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't really know where the idea came from. I think part of the genesis of it was that I had a couple of books lying around that I knew that I wasn't going to get around to reading if I didn't give myself a specific reason to. And they were
Yeah.
also like at least one of them was like mental health orientated. And I also kind of felt like there's something interesting about the idea of being able to read a book and actually talk about it with people while you're doing that. So I
Hmm.
was kind of hoping it would be the sort of thing where people would engage with the content in a way that they may not if it was just them reading the book, and we would be able to have discussions about it. So like like a book club where I'm the only one who has to actually read the book or has to actually possess the book, you know?
Yeah.
I guess that was kind of the genesis of it. And ultimately after the first time I did it, I was like, oh, this is actually kind of fun, right? Like I like talking with people around it, but there's something weirdly kind of relaxing about just reading aloud into a camera. You know, it was kind of fun.
Huh.
So I've been doing that recently, and the one we're doing recently is a book that if I have it right here, I think it's over there somewhere. I can't get it right now, but the one we're doing recently is very much more practical. So it's a lot more like cognitive behavioral therapy techniques and things like that. So I think that what's been nice about that is I can look at that and I can sort of say, oh yeah, this is the kind of thing that my therapist told me years ago, or I've used this technique or that technique, and I can talk about it in those kinds of ways. So yeah, it's been fun, and it's like I say, I'm really bad at um, I'm really bad at tearing myself away from screens and actually sitting down and reading a physical book.
Yeah.
You know, like that. That's something I always want to do more of and never get around to. So
Mm-hmm.
this was a nice way for me to at least kind of partially do that and you know combine the two together, be sitting in front of a screen with a book. So yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, I know. I used to be such a big reader when
Mm-hmm.
I was much younger, and
Yeah.
you know, ever since then, like the busier I get and the more time I spend on screen, it's just the less time I've allocated towards that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Me too.
that
Same
was
thing.
that was my New Year's like resolution. I was like, all right, I'm gonna read 20 books this year. I've read one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the
Yeah.
middle of like Aunt Kind. It's a book by Charlie Kaufman.
Uh,
I don't know if you know
I've
Charlie Kaufman. He's the guy
I've
who
heard of
did
Charlie Kaufman. Yeah.
he did Being John Malkovich,
Mm-hmm.
Synecdoche, New York, a whole bunch of other stuff. He's a
Mm-hmm.
super funny guy, and this book's like the funniest thing I've ever read.
Yeah.
But yeah, I the only book that I actually finished was The Biggest Bluff, Maria Konikova's
Oh,
book that
cool.
she wrote
Okay.
about poker. It's if you haven't read it, it's really good.
I haven't. I'm very sure it's very good because I know you know what a good writer she is and
Hmm.
everything. And yeah, it's another one on the list. I just haven't got around to it, you
Yeah,
know. So it's I have you know what I have a Kindle with probably God knows how many books on there that I buy, and I'm like, oh, this looks like a really great book. I should read this. And then for a while, like prior to the pandemic, I was like, okay, whenever I get on a plane, I'm going to take this and I'm going to read a book on a plane because I do read when I'm on a plane,
hmm,
but I haven't taken a plane flight. I haven't taken a flight in a year. So like, you know, I haven't had any of that opportunity. So it's, yeah, when I start getting back to a point where I'm flying again, maybe I'll start reading more as well. Who knows?
yeah. No, I'm trying to like I've been trying to fix my sleep schedule again because I keep messing it
Mm-hmm.
up, and I have an
Mm-hmm.
8 a.m. class, which
Oh
is
yeah, brutal.
it's a nightmare. And the other night I got like 2 hours of sleep or something
Oh
for no
geez.
reason. For some reason probably, but I didn't drink a lot of caffeine and I wasn't up studying, so it was
Yeah,
just
I
like
was going to point out that bottle of Mountain Dew in the background right there. I was going to blame that, but
that is my roommates.
okay.
I don't drink Mountain Dew. I think like I drink soda too much. That's another thing I do, but
Hmm.
I'm not sponsored by this company anymore. But I used to I used to have some deal with them before the pandemic where I was gonna go do work for them, and
Uh-huh.
but yeah, it's like a sparkling water that's caffeinated, which
Ah,
is
okay.
like
Interesting.
it's interesting, but gosh, I don't know. I just need to work on fixing my sleep schedule.
Yeah, too
It's
much
just
caffeine is a real killer.
yeah.
That's I really I try very hard to avoid that. I only drink decaf coffee now and yeah, caffeine and sugar are the two things that like just ruin my sleep
Yeah.
if I have too much of them. So I just avoid like the plague.
Yeah, and what kills me too is the fact that well, I've had ADHD my like
Hmm.
for my entire life,
Sure.
and I haven't been medicated for like all of it. Like there's a point where I
Hmm.
was medicated, and then that medication was like killing my mental health. Like it was
Hmm.
like I would just get I was like depressed as like a third grader because I would just like cry over like doing math problems or something
Oh,
like that.
geez.
Like it was just
Hmm.
like driving me insane. And then once I got off of it, like it was so much better. Like
Yeah. Wow.
I was probably less attentive, but like it was like my mom was like I was horrible. She said I was like
Yeah.
you, it was awful, and she was like terrified for me. Like, but and then now I've taken medication again recently, and then it's
Hmm.
just it's weird because like some days like I just can't focus entirely,
Right. Hmm.
and I'm guessing you haven't dealt with ADHD, but it's just one of those things
No.
that's like weird, and I've just been trying to like get to like a point like mentally where I can not take the medication anymore, because they're like amphetamines essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and they're
Yeah.
not the best for you physically. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just like have been working a lot on that mentally. I didn't know if like you've had like any experience with like trying to like work with your mental health stuff, like just trying to work
Mm-hmm.
similarly to that, to like I guess maybe
Yeah.
it's different with the with amphetamines, but anyways.
It might be. I don't know. I mean, the weird part about me with the mental health side of things is like my awareness of concepts around that, or my self-awareness around like what I had been through or was going through was just a complete void until like a certain point, right? Where the first time I saw a therapist was 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, like as a kid, I had anxiety, but it was talked about like, and this is a trippy thing for me. Like I had anxiety as a kid, but I didn't find out that I had anxiety as a kid until I was about 28. Um, because even though I went through it and I had memories of, you know, going through it, I wasn't actually aware because I had no memory of this, but I had apparently been to a doctor and been diagnosed with anxiety at a certain point. And then it was, it was like my family apparently did such a poor job of actually addressing it that I just wasn't aware of it. Like I went through my whole teenage years and my early adulthood not being aware that I had ever been diagnosed with anxiety,
Hmm.
and then talked to my mom about it when I was like 28, and she was like, "Oh yeah, a doctor told you when you were like 7 or something that you had anxiety." It was like, why didn't you? Why did I not know about this? Like what this it was nuts. But certainly on the yeah in the later few years as well, like only in the last year, like only at the beginning of 2020 was I first actually prescribed anything to deal with
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and depression and things that I'd gone through over, God knows how many years of my life. So it's still a new experience for me dealing with it, and I still have, like, I've had 2 days so far this year where I've just like spaced out and forgotten to take my meds at night, and it messes with me something rotten. And I could not believe that I forgot the second time, because the first time was such a nightmare
Mm-hmm.
that I do not want to forget again. It was like being I didn't really sleep, but it was like feeling like you were dizzy for no reason. Like you
Huh.
just feel like, or at least I felt like I was sort of like that feeling you get when you're like losing your balance, almost like
Yeah.
you're sort of
Like vertigo, isn't that like, I
yeah,
guess, a
maybe
medical
maybe a
term?
little bit, yeah, like a little bit like that or something. But like I felt like that, and I was like, what the hell's going on? Why do I feel like this? And then the next day I'm like checking my little like pill container thing that I have, and it's like, oh, the pills from Friday night are still in there. I didn't take those pills on Friday night. Like that's why I felt completely messed up last night. And somehow I did that a second time. So like
Yeah.
dealing with that kind of stuff, and learning to understand how you respond to medication, and for me
It's
learning
important.
learning to respond how I respond, learning to understand how I respond to it, and to to get to a point where I felt like I had a good understanding of um what I was getting out of the medication, and what was different, and I felt like my body had adjusted to it. Like it took a while, but I'm very glad, because it's made a huge difference for me.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad that my wife encouraged me to actually go see a psychiatrist in late 2019 for the first time, because I had never really thought about that before. I always thought of it
Mm-hmm.
as like, this is something for somebody who's in a worse position than I am. Like I shouldn't need that. Like it should be, I should be able to do this myself. This is just a problem with me, as opposed to, nah, this is a thing. This is a thing in your brain that needs to be to some degree rectified.
Right.
And that that was definitely a big turning point for me. And I don't think if it wasn't for the meds that I'm taking, I don't think I'd be in a good enough spot, mental health wise, to be able to like do streaming and all the stuff that I do, really.
Yeah.
Because for the longest time, even just the balancing act of managing my SolveForWhy work and my private coaching work, um, and then my home life and social life and things like that, that in itself took such a toll on me that I just would get really, really stressed out, and I had real trouble managing the stress that I had during probably 2018 and 2019. Maybe the latter half of 2018 was easier on the stress front because I just had a really good World Series and I just won a bunch of money. So like everything's easier when you've just come off the most successful period of tournaments you've had. So
Right.
when you're on a big heater, everything's easier. But then, you go back to kind of normal life and you very quickly start to get overwhelmed again, or at least I did. And it's amazing how much of a difference being on the right medication has made, not just to how I feel or what my mood is like or anything like that, but how I cope with and respond to stress as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I still have times where I get very stressed, and I still have days where I'm like, oh man, I really feel like I could just use a day off right now. Um, but I don't get that feeling where I feel very overwhelmed by all of it, and that just
Yeah.
makes such a big difference. And I've been really, really happy with the meds that I was prescribed, and I'm very grateful that I was able to get access to what I have.
Yeah, yeah, I am too. That I've been in this situation, and I guess the most ironic thing about having ADHD and being medicated for it
Mm-hmm.
is the forgetting
Yeah.
taking it, because that
Right.
happens oh so frequently, especially when
Mm-hmm.
I have like an 8 a.m. class and I just am
Yeah.
sitting there for like 5 minutes trying to remember if I took it or not. And then
Oh,
eventually I
geez.
get to like a point where I'm like, I totally forgot.
Yeah,
And
because that if you did take it, you can't take it again, right? If you did take it, and taking it again would be more damaging than not taking it in the first place, and
yeah,
that's always the way it is for me. So it's
yeah,
like, if if I ever am not sure if I forgot or not, I have to treat it like I did take them, because and then just deal with it if it turns out that I didn't, because it would be way worse to go the other
oh
direction.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. If I
yeah,
took like
it's
another one, my heart rate would just like explode. Like I'd
yeah,
just
right.
be a maniac.
Right. Who knows what you'd be like at that point.
No one wants to see that. No,
Right.
nobody ever. I think maybe it'd be like an entertaining Twitch stream, but I would never do that for a Twitch stream.
Yeah, I feel like that would be a bit, it would probably, it might be your last Twitch stream as
It
well.
would
It might
be,
be like you might end up doing something that would get you banned or something like that.
yeah, I know, and I would never want to encourage people to ever do anything
Yeah, I mean,
like that.
exactly. Like that would be, I think, I can't think of a dumber idea than deliberately taking a double dose of your meds and then doing a Twitch stream just because you want to see what happens.
Yeah,
So don't do that,
yeah,
guys. Do
yeah.
not do that.
The best part is I see. So there's like two doses that I have. It's like a 10 and a 5 milligram,
Hmm.
and I can take like the 5 milligram in the afternoon on some
Yeah.
days because
Hmm.
my Mondays and Wednesdays are I have an 8 a.m. class and an 8
Hmm.
p.m. class.
Oh, geez. That's brutal.
It is maybe the worst thing I've ever done to myself.
Yeah,
But
it's terrible.
I know, but it was like with COVID stuff, you just
Hmm.
can't schedule classes. Like it's
Yeah.
terrible. Like trying
Hmm.
to, being especially I'm only a sophomore, and so I'm like on the lower rung of people who can get
Yeah.
into classes, and like the courses just aren't available.
Wow, they didn't even do that to us in college. Like for us, it was you your classes will start at 9 a.m. at the earliest, and your classes will finish before 6 p.m. Like that's it.
Yeah.
That was just the day, and there was no, like we were at the point where, like, I think by the time I got to like my third year, when you get your calendar or you get your schedule for the year, you're like pissed off if you actually have something on a Friday afternoon, because it gets pretty common that you have nothing on a Friday, right? So you're like sweating the schedule when you get it, like to see how good you run for the
Mhm.
schedule. And some semesters it would be like, I remember there was one where it was like I ran really good because it was like, in fact, it was my first year. The second semester of my first year, I ran amazing because they dealt me nothing on a Monday and nothing on a Friday. So I could literally, if I wanted to, I could be I could just have a 4-day weekend. Yeah, I could just be like Friday through Monday. I could just go home. I could just be wherever I wanted to be. And I didn't do that in the end because I still had work to do. So it wasn't like as nice as it could have been. But
Right.
I just had stuff Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and my days were packed all 3 days. But like other times, I got dealt like one year I got dealt a Friday afternoon off, which was great. And then another year I got dealt like a really annoying schedule where I had like 4 out of 5 mornings, I had like a 9 a.m. and then I would have nothing at like lunchtime and then stuff later in the afternoon. So it's like you go to campus in the morning and then you kind of want to go home and like, you know, chill because you've got like 3 hours or whatever, but it takes X amount of time to get home and then you got to come back again because you've got some class later on. So it's like I had all these days where you just go to a class and then you just hang out on campus for like 5 hours and then eventually you go to your next class and then you go home. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of variance in college, I guess.
Yeah.
Variance in college schedules.
I am on the worst side of variance right now, but
Yeah.
I mean I'll get by. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's
And hopefully you run good next time and they don't deal you any 8 a.m.s.
yeah, no 8 a.m.s. No, I will never be taking a night class again,
Oh
especially
yeah.
with ADHD. It's the
Yeah.
worst because I just lose most of my focus by the evening, and
Yeah.
I'm just kind of sitting there like I'll space out, and then I just have to go watch like we do like hybrid classes these days. So like half of it, like some students are in person, some are online. So
Yeah.
luckily we have like Zoom recordings of the class.
Okay,
So like if
cool.
there's something like that, I missed, like I just go watch that, and it is the one silver lining I'd say
Yeah.
that there is in Zoom classes. I guess the worst part of it was when we got started and I would play sit and goes in class.
Yeah. Yeah, I that's the part I'm sad about because I spent so many college lectures not paying much attention. I wish I had at least been grinding poker during that time to make some use out of it, instead of just like doing whatever random shit that I was doing. And back in those days, by the way, I started college in 2005. There was no looking at your phone in class because we didn't have smartphones back
No.
then. Like this was I mean, I am old enough to have been in the generation of college students that wasn't able to just browse Twitter during class or, just be on Reddit or something. Like if you, by the time I got to the end of my degree, people were bringing laptops to class and stuff, but like it was good old fashioned pen and paper, most of the time when I was in college. And so if you could just not be paying attention, but there wasn't really anything to distract you. Like
Yeah.
you were just sitting on your ass, really bored for most of the class. And I really regret how many hours I wish I had either just not gone to the class and done something else, or I'd gone there and actually focused. Either one of those would have been a completely fine outcome. But in the end, I ended up splitting the difference most of the time and just being there, but just paying very little attention. So
Yeah.
I didn't exactly get the most out of my college years. So don't be like me.
I try my best. I don't even bring my laptop to class. I've just taken like handwritten notes for better or for worse, even though my handwriting is pretty bad. But if I have my laptop there, I will not pay attention. I mean, I do have my phone, but I just have to just sit there and take notes. Some of my professors are just like, we don't want you to have technology in the class.
Wow.
Like they've just flat out just been like, don't even like put your computer on your desk. Like I don't want to see it.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I know you probably want to get going right about now.
Sure. Yeah.
Two quick questions. One I had left. One, do you
Sure.
play? I'm just curious about mixed games in general from other poker players.
Oh,
Have you
okay.
ever played mixed games? Do you enjoy them, or do you
Not
want
to any
them?
significant degree. I am not good at any mixed game, but I enjoy them. I've always wanted to get to the point where I can be the kind of player who has enough sort of disposable bankroll to just like play like the 1K triple draw at the World Series and stuff like that. Just even though I probably suck at that game, I would want to be able to just like play a tournament just for fun in that area. So, yeah, mixed games are fun, but I am probably not good at them. And I would like to learn at some point, but learning is hard because there's not a lot of resources.
I know. I love mixed. I just like mixed games. I like watching them, even though I don't get a chance to play them because they're not online.
Sure. Yeah.
But, yeah. And my other question is, well, you said earlier you didn't think that you'd end up right. Well, I think you were talking about like software or something. But so in the last 10 years of your playing poker, did you think that you would end up where you are? And in your next 10 years, do you have any idea where you'll end up being?
I had, well, put it this way, right? 2010, late 2010, I was teaching. This was like a little teaching sort of internship thing that I did. I was out in Turkey. I was teaching at an
Wow.
American school. I was teaching English, and we did some class at some point where and we were teaching people of all ages, and a lot of them were quite similar to my age. And somewhat we were doing like one of those classes where when you're teaching a language, sometimes it's like you just learn simple stuff, like it's like where do you live, or where do you want to live, or like what city would you most like to live in, and stuff like that. You just use these little questions as exercises. And so we were doing this that whole exercise where everybody in the class was like saying, okay, what city do you want to live in? And most of them were naming like random cities in Turkey that they liked for one reason or another. Some of them were saying like, I want to live in London or Berlin or somewhere. And then I said Vegas, because I was like, at that time I was just getting into poker. I was like, oh, I'd really love to go live in Vegas. And of course, they were all super confused because there's not a lot of gambling in Turkey. It's a Muslim country. Gambling is not legal for the most part. And I got the most blank stares from them, like to the point where I was like, did I just say something really wrong? Like, am I being judged right now? And it was fine. Like I hadn't said anything wrong at all. They were confused about why the idea of living in Vegas was appealing to me, right?
Right.
But I remember that was 10 years ago, and I was like, yeah, I want to live in Vegas. And now I do live in Vegas. So I'm like, I didn't think I'd get to this point, but it's worked out really well. And a lot of it is just because I was lucky enough to meet my wife.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very grateful just for that. But the as far as where I want to be 10 years from now, or where I might be, like I just stopped trying to predict. Like
Yeah.
I feel like anybody who's a millennial like me, like the world has changed so much since we were 18 almost, that you stop trying to predict. Like when I went into college, we were all told like you're going to get you're going to get so many job opportunities after college, and it's all going to be great. And you know you guys are, at the time, for languages, the subject I studied, my university was the third best in the country after Oxford and Cambridge. And they were like, you guys are going to be fine in 4 years when you come out. And then when we come out, it's 2009, and the economic crash of 2008 has just ruined everything.
Yeah.
And there's no jobs, and absolutely none of us are fine. And half of us are going into doing master's degrees and becoming poker players and random shit like that, because we have no idea what to do with our lives. And so,
Yeah.
particularly in the UK, but my generation of millennials in general, I feel like after 2008 happened, we all just stopped like trying to make long-term plans. We just like said, okay, if I have a roof over my head for the next year, I'm cool. Like, and with everything that technology's changed in the world since then, it hasn't gotten any easier to make long-term plans. So beyond the fact that I'm still going to be with my wife and I'm still going to be involved in poker in some capacity, I have absolutely no idea where I'm going to be in 10 years. And I kind of like that. Like, I feel like if I did know for sure where I was going to be 10 years from now, maybe life would be a little less interesting. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy with that.
Yeah. Uh, all right. Well, anything else you want to say
No, I,
to
I mean, I
anybody
guess
before you head on?
I should probably plug my stream, right?
Right.
I'm Mental Health Matt on Twitch. So do come along, check out the stream. I'm going to be doing I'm going to be doing a bunch of things. We have on Tuesdays, we have Dr. Rob Tarswell, who's a psychiatrist friend of mine, also plays poker, who comes in to answer questions and talk about topics related to psychiatry and things like that. Um, Thursdays, we're going to be doing interviews again eventually, but for the time being, on Thursdays, we're doing the read along, as we mentioned, of the book Mind Over Mood. And we're also just playing video games. So
Okay.
if you would like to come hang out, if you're watching this, I am more than happy to have you guys with us. So that's the stream.
Yep.
And on Twitter, I'm on Twitter. I'm at Mental Health Matt, but without the E in mental and without the E and the A in health. So it's like Mental Health Matt basically. But yeah,
Okay.
you can check me out on social media right there.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, Matt. I don't know when you're planning on hanging or leaving, but I was just gonna ask you to stay for like 1 second after I cut the stream, just to make sure that the
Sure.
recording doesn't like dip on
Yeah, no
me.
problem.
But everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching this on YouTube, come on, hang out on Twitch. I'll send you a link for the YouTube whenever I get that up.
Sure.
too. But yeah, so if you're watching also on YouTube, come hang out with us live next time, twitch.tv/BGP_2000. And if you're on Twitch, check out YouTube if you missed any portion of this interview. Thank you so much for joining me again, Matt.
No problem.
And
Happy to be here.
yeah, I hope to see everybody soon.